Coming up next on Correctional TV, another Gangland-style hit occurs at a Texas lockup, leaving a suspected gang member dead. The federal prison system remains under a nationwide lockdown after a killing of 2 suspected Surenos gang members by MS-13 in Beaumont. 4 inmates escape a lockup in Oklahoma. 2 officers in Minnesota are sent to the hospital after a violent attack by an inmate. 4 officers and a sergeant end up in the hospital at a riot in Seneca County, New York. And finally, continuing coverage of Rikers Island out of control. A female correctional officer files a lawsuit over a sexual assault and alleged disparate treatment. Stick around and find out the latest headlines from around the nation. Welcome to Correctional TV as we look at the latest correctional headlines from around North America. Breaking news out of New York City. The New York Daily News is reporting that a 38-year-old correctional officer claims she was pressured to return to Rikers Island after being sexually assaulted by an inmate is now suing. A jail psychologist pressured her to return to work and had her committed to a psych ward after she indicated that she had past suicidal thoughts. The 38-year-old former officer had been sexually assaulted by offender Michael Lewis at the Otis M. Bantam Correctional Center on May 16th of 2020. Lewis pled guilty to first-degree sexual abuse and was sentenced to only 5 years in prison. The New York State Sex Offender Database shows Lewis was previously convicted of sexually assaulting a 5-year-old child in 2012 and only received 54 months. This guy is a sexual predator. The Correctional Officers Benevolent Association stated to the New York Daily News that more than 24 correctional department staffers were sexually assaulted last year. 24! The New York prosecutors are giving out sweet deals to sexual pervs. This needs to stop. This guy was brazen enough to sexually assault a public servant. He should be receiving decades. Now turning to officer assaults from around the nation. The Minnesota Department of Corrections indicated 2 officers were assaulted by an inmate Sunday, January 30th, during a routine search of the inmate's cell. The officers were treated at the Lakeview Hospital for injuries and release. The incident will be referred to the county for prosecution. In a statement to Correctional TV, Minnesota Department of Corrections spokesman Nicholas Kimball stated that correctional officers are brave men and women who play a critical part in the efforts to transform lives and make Minnesota a safer place to live. We are grateful for the quick work of our staff in responding to the situation. Now turning to New York State, where Syracuse.com is reporting 4 correctional officers and a sergeant were hospitalized Monday when a riot broke out in the chow hall at a maximum security prison in Seneca County, New York. Several inmates reportedly attacked officers after a disturbance in the chow hall of the 5 Points Correctional Facility. The incident remains under investigation. Now breaking news out of Oklahoma. 4 inmates escaped the McCurtain County Jail. Inmates still on the lam were identified as Justin Michael Hughes, Donnie Cale Middlebrooks, Jerome Lynn Rutherford Jr. According to News on 6 out of Tulsa, Oklahoma, McCurtain County captured Colby Russell Watson with the assistance of the Choctaw Tribal Police. Now turning to San Antonio, an inmate at the Bexar County Jail was murdered this past week in what appears to be an internal gang hit involving members of the Mexican Mafia. The inmate, who was identified as Vincent Garcia, age 40, had told an officer through an intercom he was in fear for his life. 2 alleged gang members were able to break out of their cells and stab Garcia multiple times. The suspects were identified by Bexar County Sheriff Javier Salazar during a press conference this week as Brandon Lee Lerma, age 28, and Ernesto Manuel Tavara, age 50. Here's what Sheriff Salazar had to say about the murder.
The inmate really wasn't too exact but just kept telling the deputy that he did not feel comfortable in the living unit cadet that was in training. He observed that one of the warning lights on the control panel lit up, which indicated a door was opening. Cadet says that he looked up from the console and saw two inmates rushing out of a unit, out of a cell, and rushing toward the officer and toward the deputy and the inmate. He was able to open up the picket door. The cadet was able to open up the picket door, and the deputy retreated into the picket area. They then observed the two inmates, the suspects, attack the victim inmate and began what they believed was an assault, was a fight. That assault moved back and forth from the area. The cadet was able to open up another door, which let the victim escape that area. The victim additionally was brought down to the infirmary, where a short while later he expired due to his injuries. What we know is that his injuries consisted of a series of stab wounds to the upper body.
Another gangland murder led the federal prison system to a nationwide lockdown this last week after a murder of two inmates at USP Beaumont. The victims were believed to be alleged members of the Surenos gang who were murdered allegedly by MS-13 gang members. That wraps up this edition of Correctional News. Subscribe to our channel for the latest correctional news and content from around North America.